Right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Inshallah, we at the DB Islamic Association will be having a little chat, a bayan about hiding from death, especially with regards to the COVID strain and even the second strain, and an Islamic response in terms of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dealt with this in the Quran and hadith. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم تر إلى الذين خرجوا من ديارهم وهم ألوف حذر الموت فقال لهم الله موتوا ثم أحياهم إن الله لذو فضل على الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يشكرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks specifically about our situation, right, by giving us the story, this narrative in Quran, where it begins with Alif Fatah, Ah. And this is called Istifhaam, or an interrogative particle. What does it say? It is an indication that when an ayah begins with this, it tells us it is a question. But not just an ordinary question like, how old are you? But it's a question in which it's supposed to provoke some amazement, some thought, some longing to hear what will follow. So if Allah asks us about this, right, this indicates that we should have a great thought about it. So we continue. Alam tara ila alladhina karaju min diyarihim. Now here, Allah is saying, He's speaking about the people who went out from their homes. Now, who are these people? If we look at our little map here, you can see that in Medina, right, this is where we are, and we're talking about people that scholars, Ibn Kathir and others have suggested that they are in a little village over here, somewhere in Iraq. And these people left their homes. Now, we want to know specifically, Allah continues by speaking about the fact that not just who they are, but we know about how many left. So can you imagine if there were 10 people who got up and left from where we are now, or even 50 got up? Wouldn't that be all of us and all of them got up together and left? Everybody would be like, something is wrong. We should be taking notice. So that is what this here, the Alif Fatah, the Ah, the beginning is telling us. Listen, mankind and jinn, and all who the Quran was sent for. Take notice of this story. The story about those people who got up and left their homes. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, right, in Quran, He's telling you how many, right? When He says, Wahum ulufun. Now, it's not 10, it's not 50. Aluf means 1,000. But this here says ulufun, meaning thousands. There were thousands of people who left the home. Right? So when they left their home, can you imagine some scholars believe there are 4,000 people who went home that night and left, packed up and left. Or some said 8,000. Now let's put 8,000 into context. We are in the community of Devi. Our population is approximately 8,000 people. Can you imagine everybody going home in all of our community, packing up their belongings, putting it into their means of transport and leaving their houses and going? That everybody left DB tonight? What does that mean? That is supposed to bring to us to increase us in deep thinking about what this situation is that has caused this. And there are other scholars who talk about that it wasn't even 8. Some of them went as far as to say there were 70,000 people who left their homes. Now, why did that happen? Why did these people come and leave? Allah continues in the next 2 words saying this, where He says, Hadar al-Maut. Now, Hadara, it means to be cautious or fearful. And fearful of what? Maut. Maut means death. So these people, Allah is saying, think about it. Think about the fact that so many thousands of people just went home, right? And they were so scared and just packed up everything and left because they were fearful of death. So the scholars speak about the fact that when you look at the tafsir of Al-Quran, speaks about the fact that there was a plague. And these people left their homes saying, we should go to a land free of death. So they came out of their homes and went and settled in a fertile valley between two hills. Right? So we saw the map and looked at the general area of where this was happening, right? And Allah continues now with the story in the same ayah where He says, فَقَالَ لَهُمُ اللَّهُ, Allah then said to them, Mutu, which is plural for mouth. So Allah still said to them, even though they left their homes and went, He said to them, die. And some scholars talk about the fact that there were two angels that were sent on the opposite sides of the valley, and simultaneously together, the two angels let out a scream, and all of them who were there, the thousands of them, man, woman, child, everybody died as if it was one man dying immediately. And that was how Allah's command was carried out. So we continue many years later, right? There was a prophet who was a very pious man, of course, and he's well renowned, right? So much so that he's recognized in the Jewish scriptures, in the Christian scriptures, even spoken about in the Baha'i faith, right? And this prophet is Prophet Hizqil, or loosely translated Ezekiel, right? So Ezekiel had passed this way many years later, and and when he came across this, what did he see? Complete devastation. But when we talk about this, think about the fact that these people have passed on due to Allah's will, and since the years have passed, there's no hair, there's no flesh, there's no thing. All there are bones that are left. And so much so that the bones themselves fell apart, they kind of separated out. So it's scattered, it's strewn all over. So the Prophet Hizqil has come upon this and is looking at this devastation. And then what does he do? Right? So Allah talks about this as he continues within the ayah. Right? Prophet Hizqil, Allah's prophet, made dua, made supplication, invocation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And when he made supplication to them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replied continuing in the ayah when he said, Thumma, then, because my prophet said this, he said, Ahyahum. Then he, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gave them haya, gave them back life. Now, how did he give them back life? It said that he commanded his prophet to say, O rotten bones. So Allah commands you to come together. So following Allah's command, Hizqil made the dua and then said this command, O rotted bones, Allah commands you to come back together. And what does that mean? The bones, when he's standing up and he's watching these thousands of bones scattered all over, they started to come back to the bodies, right? To form back and connect to each other. So by the time it was done and he's seeing this with his eyes, they were like skeletons. And then another command came where he said, Allah told him to say, O bones, Allah commands you to be covered with flesh, nerves, and skin. And these things happened right in front of Hizqil's eyes, right? While he was watching, the skeleton became covered with these. Now, when we look at it, it would look like somebody who is sleeping now, or not sleeping is the sister of death, right? So what is lacking in this here, in these people? The last command, O souls, Allah commands you to return each to the body that it used to inhabit. So by this point in time, right, the entire of the community are back alive. And Allah continues now and reminds us of his greatness and his power, that he has the ability to do such. When he continues in the ayah, Inna Allah ladu fadlin ala nas. Indeed, Certainly, surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is possessor of bounty, of boons and favors for all of mankind, for all of Nas. And he ends the ayah by reminding them of what happens, by saying, وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ. Right? And it says, but most of the people are la, not yashkurun, not grateful. And those two words at the end of the ayah there, we say that all the time, every day. When we recite dua kunut, right, there's a part of it in which we say, right, la yashkurun. Oh Allah, do not let us be of the ungrateful. What, right? So remember that shukr, right? That mankind is supposed to be grateful and thankful to Allah, but many of them are not. Allah is reminding us that, first of all, in the line above, it speaks about that He is so beneficial and so helpful, and yet mankind is so ungrateful. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now says, as we continue, one thing here, if you remember, right, what happened to this general story here, it is about the fact that there's another ayah in Surah Jumu'ah, right, chapter 62, verse 8, which gives us a similar story quickly. قُلْ إِنَّ الْمَوْتَ الَّذِي تَفَرِّنُوا مِنْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مُلَاقِيكُمْ. See, indeed, the death with which you flee from, it will surely meet you. And that's something for us to take a look at in terms of what are we getting from this here. The fact that Allah reminded us about these people so long ago, and when the plague hit them, how they behaved, right? And yet what they fled from, they did not escape it. Death still met them, as Allah reminds us in this ayah here of Surah Jumu'ah. Sorry. Right. So let's connect that now, because this was an old story, right? Hizqil was a prophet of Bani Israel, right? Of the people of the children of Israel, one of the many prophets Allah sent to them. So now let's connect that now, and we come down the chain. After him came Isa alayhi salam, and then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So how did this affect the Sahabas? So let's remember that that approximately in the 11th year after the Hijrah, right, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to take him back. And at that point in time, we're not going into it too much detail, but the fact is that there was now appointed the first Caliph, Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, right? And he ruled for maybe about 27 months, a little more than 2 years. And by then, he became sick and he passed away. And then the second Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, he became the leader of the Muslims, right? In roughly the year 13 AH or so, roughly. Right? Now we come into the point of how the Sahabas implemented this, because our story is really happening in the 17th year after Hijrah, which means to say that the Prophet ﷺ has already passed. So there's when this situation occurs, right? There is no Nabi to ask, even though these are the Sahabas dealing with it, and the Tabi'een, right? The Tabi'een are the first generation after the Sahabas as well, right? All of them are coming in dealing with this, right? Dealing with this situation, and they, just like us, right? Now will have to depend on Quran, right, and Hadith in order to make the judgment to what to do, just as we are presently tested similarly. So in the 17th year, right, it was called the year of the ashes. And the year of the ashes because the drought was